Hi guys, my name is Susie Dawson. I'm a journalist and activist from Auckland, New Zealand. I'm a member of the Occupy Auckland and Occupy New Zealand media teams, and I am possibly one of the 88 New Zealanders that was targeted by our domestic and international spy agencies and passed on to the NSA for further targeting. I'm going to give a little talk now. It's called Diary of a Person of Interest. It's based on a talk that I gave last year in Germany at the Chaos Communications camp. In 2011, I barely knew what an activist was, but when the Occupy movement started, I couldn't help but join. I could see people all around the world actually found a way to take a stand for themselves and for their communities, and I got on board. My understanding of activism in New Zealand was based on what we were told by human rights lawyers at the very first march on October 15th, 2011. We were told that New Zealanders have the right to dissent, that we have the right to freedom of assembly, to freedom of association, the right to seek redress from our government, and that we could not be discriminated against on the basis of political opinion. I naively took all of that at face value. I thought that would protect me, and I thought that would protect the other occupiers and other members of my media team. We believed and had been told our whole lives, we'd been propagandized, that New Zealand was the safest, most peaceful country in the world. Never in a million years did it occur to us that what would happen to us would happen. We found out the hard way that everything I just told you about New Zealand is not true. Our entire media team, and then later an ever-broadening section of society, became aggressively targeted by domestic and international intelligence agencies. When we started the media team, we had a primary goal of amplifying the voices of everybody in our movement, to cover all of the issues related to Occupy, not just to cherry pick which ones we personally supported, but to support all of the issues in a non-biased fashion, no matter what they were. All of the issues that were named and discussed actually in the first declaration, the founding declaration of Occupy Wall Street.
We come to you at a time when corporations, which place profit over people, self-interest over justice, and oppression over equality, run our governments. They have taken our houses through an illegal foreclosure process despite not having the original mortgage. They have taken bailouts from taxpayers with impunity and continue to give executives exorbitant bonuses. They have continuously sought to strip employees of the right to negotiate for better pay and safer working conditions. They have held students hostage with tens of thousands of dollars of debt on education, which is itself a human right. They have sold our privacy as a commodity. They have used the military and police force to prevent freedom of the press. They determine economic policy despite the catastrophic failures their policies have produced and continue to produce. They purposefully kept people misinformed and fearful through their control of the media.
Our secondary aim was to bear witness to events that were happening on the ground in Auckland and to share news of that as far and wide as we could with the rest of the movement and the rest of the world. Additionally, we contributed our own voices based on our own experiences of what was going on. We really were eyewitnesses on the ground. For my personal safety, I and many other members of my media team remained anonymous to the outside world. Our occupation knew who we were, our fellow occupiers and fellow media team members knew who we were. Unfortunately, the police agencies and security agencies knew who we were, but we operated under pseudonyms online. That served us well to a certain extent, but as the targeting of us became more and more pervasive, it became dangerous to remain masked to the world. And ultimately, in late 2014, I came forward and told everybody, hey, this is who I am, and this is what is happening to me. What drove us other than commitment to the movement and to representing people on the ground who really needed advocacy and really needed our voices, our motto was really, if not us, then who? If we aren't going to tell the truth, who is going to do it? If we aren't going to make change, who is going to do it? If we aren't going to push back against our corrupt media and our corrupt government, who is going to do it? If not us, then who? So when I've had to tell people in the past, hey, look, I'm being targeted by these security agencies, the first thing that they ask me is why? Why you? Why would they care about you? Unfortunately, I can't give one easy answer to that because I didn't just do one thing. There are a lot of reasons why. There is Occupy. Everybody knows now, finally, that the FBI, the DHS were involved in the suppression of Occupy, that through the Perth committees, the mayors across the entire United States were colluding for the destruction of the Occupy movement. What few people realize is that those fusion centers that were bringing all those agencies together are also operating with international agencies and in countries outside of America. And unfortunately, that's precisely what happened to us. Another reason I've been targeted is because during the Occupy movement, we were supported by the Anonymous movement. They did a lot to promote and to try to help us and to try to protect us.
PERF assisted in organizing and coordinating the recent raids on Occupy encampments nationwide in the United States. We couldn't sit idle while we watched our brothers and sisters being beaten, gassed, and sent to hospitals for exercising fundamental rights and essential liberties that were bestowed on them by their Constitution.
Additionally, us occupiers, because of the close proximity in time between the FBI raid of Kim.com's mansion, which I believe was January 20th, 2012, and the raids on Occupy Auckland of January 23rd and January 26th, which was just the other end of the weekend after the Kim.com raid, we realized that some really fishy stuff was going on, that we weren't just facing local police in Auckland, that the FBI were actually operating on the ground in New Zealand, which they had no right to do whatsoever.
There's two police officers with the exact same badge number, Z557. There's one somewhere around here, and one of them is brutalising Malcolm. Why have they got the same number on there? Oh look, there's a third one with the same badge number, Z557. Somebody answer me, why are there three police officers with the same badge number?
So we supported Kim.com and we support justice for him, and we are very much against FBI overreach into our country, and we are very much against our government's collusion with the FBI and targeting and suppressing dissent in New Zealand. When Kim.com started the Internet Party, we threw our full weight behind that as well, for the same reason. We need alternative political voices in our country. Both the two conventional, so-called, the New Zealand version of the Democrats and Republicans drastically let us down, and we need a change. Internet Party was our best shot at that, so we did everything we could to promote it. Unfortunately, as with every other movement, many of those people involved with Internet Party also were targeted. The GCSB movement is the movement that we started in 2012-2013 to try to combat the GCSB. They're supposed to target foreign countries, but instead they targeted New Zealand citizens. This led to huge protests all over the country in New Zealand, absolutely massive protests and widespread public support for our movement. Unfortunately, the government just passed legislation, retroactive legislation, to make what they had done to us illegally, legal. They just legalize it after the fact. I, in the course of my journalism, have written about not just FBI and CIA and agencies like this and DHS and whatnot. I've written pretty extensively too about the Five Eyes.
Hell yeah, it's closed down the Five Eyes.
I shared some information about the Waihopai spy base, which is the huge international spy base in New Zealand, in Nelson, with a friend of mine who happens to be the drummer of the best rock band in the history of my country. Next thing we know, they released a #1 album called 5i that had young people all over New Zealand walking around singing lyrics about "Why Hope I Spy Bass." Also, as a very early supporter of Edward Snowden, and also my favourite journalist in the world is Glenn Greenwald. I've written about both of them pretty extensively as well. Yet another reason I was targeted. Of course, in 2014 we had Glenn Greenwald come to New Zealand and for an event with Kim.com and Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. The event was called Moment of Truth, #MOT. Yet another reason that I was targeted. I was voraciously targeted in the lead up to that event and also in the election that followed.
We're live on air at Radio 6PR in Perth, and what a time to speak. We've got Kim.com and his new political party. We've got Key over there in New Zealand facing an election. It's pretty amazing, and especially for people like you and me who've been howled down by a lot of people in mainstream as saying, oh, this stuff about the spies can't be true, the government wouldn't do that to us. The truth is far stranger than what people were describing as fiction, I would say.
I think the Snowden revelations as a whole showed us that the most dramatic conspiracy theories that have been concocted paled in comparison to the reality. That the illegal surveillance and the extent of it has been far beyond anything that anybody could have anticipated or dreamed of. There is a big event here on Monday, tomorrow night, where Kim.com is hosting Glenn Greenwald and other special guests at the Auckland Town Hall.
We were saying these sorts of things a couple of years ago, and everyone's going, nah, you're crazy, you got a tinfoil hat. And now we've had confirmation that these things, in fact, have been happened and have been officially sanctioned.
It's a real shame, and light needs to be shed on it because it is subversive to our democracy to have those who speak out and who advocate for issues to then be targeted and suppressed by the state. The #GCSB tag on Twitter has over 50,000 tweets on it.
Wow.
So years worth of work by the public to bring this to light has resulted in a situation where the media can no longer ignore it.
You've been saying this for some time, and I know you've paid a price for doing so in many, many ways. And I just want to let you know that there is love and respect from all over the place for you, for sticking to your guns, for not being intimidated, and for now to see you vindicated in this. And there are even more shocks on the way. I believe Glenn Greenwald tomorrow night will be outlining some more amazing things about how our governments and our spy agencies have been lying to us.
I think the most important point that Glenn Greenwald made in his first New Zealand interview yesterday was when he said that if this huge international spy apparatus of the Five Eyes had been used to target Al-Qaeda, had been used to target ISIS, Snowden would never have leaked. The fact that Snowden did whistleblow was because there was a huge problem with how the spy apparatus was being used and turned against citizens.
Single New Zealander who is subjected to mass surveillance. That is the story that you should focus on. Get your priorities right.
We will.
I hope you will. Because in the past, Patrick, you have let New Zealanders down. I have seen your reporting in the past. I don't understand how you let the Prime Minister get away time and time again with his lies and his spin. You need to do your job, and everyone needs to do their job.
What could you tell me about the role of citizen media in exposing the GCSB activities over the last few years?
Well, without citizen media and without the humble investigative reporting of citizen journalists and supportive academics and senior journalists around the world, we would not even begin to understand understand what it is that's being presented to us today by Glenn Greenwald. What you people do is provide the base of understanding that then allows this level of information to penetrate and be shared.
So we know, thanks to The Intercept and Nikki Hager, a WikiLeaks correspondent and an amazing, awesome investigative journalist in New Zealand, that the 88 people targeted by the GCSB were referred by the GCSB to the NSA. What this means is that New Zealand citizens have had their own spy agency not only spy on them, but outsource the spying on them to a foreign government. Not only were they never supposed to spy on us in the first place, but they have passed information on their own citizens to a foreign power. That should be treason. I was also instrumental, along with my media team, in creating the hashtag #TPPA_NoWay. This is the New Zealand movement against the TPP. Dr. Jane Kelsey was the spearhead of that movement. She worked on it for years and years and years and years. And together, a whole bunch of us turned it into something really amazing. If you get on YouTube and look up Occupy NZ Media, one word, you can watch many videos of the movements that I'm talking about. You can see live footage and action coverage from my media team of these events. I was, along with some of my other media team members, really instrumental in trying to stop the war in Palestine. We started the hashtag NZ for Gaza, which became US for Gaza, NY for Gaza, DC for Gaza, all around the world that spread, and we got some pretty amazing footage.
The United States flag has been taken down from the flagpole outside the US Embassy, and a Palestinian flag has been raised in its place.
Save GI was the Glen Innes housing movement, where amazing everyday members of the public, ordinary citizens, were trying to prevent the closure of state houses and were getting beaten by police on the street. Covering that, along with other members of my media team, yet another reason why I was targeted. I could sit here and go on all day. The targeting of me led me to have to leave my country after there was attempts on my life in 2014. It went from me being spied on to me being entrapped to them actually trying to physically harm me. In January 2015, I relocated to Berlin in Germany. So the elephant in the room, which I have not named in my very long list of reasons why I've been targeted, is WikiLeaks. Even before I went to Occupy and before I knew what an activist was, I supported WikiLeaks ideologically. I shared their work. I told people how awesome I thought they were. All of the supporters of WikiLeaks are surveilled or monitored in some way, shape or form. Those who are actually active and advocating for the organisation, obviously more so than just viewers. And really at this point, don't get scared about viewing the website either, because the collector all of these governments means that they're spying on you one way or another, whether or not you go look at WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is an unbelievably valuable resource. It is a historic resource. WikiLeaks is our information vanguard and we must protect it.
In the end, we'll try to look the other way.
That's always the next question. First is why? Why are they targeting you? The next question is who exactly is targeting you? There is the state agencies and there is the private agencies. So the state agencies, we've got the police, the New Zealand police, the local community police. We have got within the police there is the threat assessment unit, there is the special investigations group. These are specific teams that are set up. They're supposed to target violent offenders. They're supposed to target people who are a real demonstrable risk to society. They're not actually supposed to target white chick from the suburbs who becomes an activist. But unfortunately that's exactly what they've been doing. Then we have the spies, which is the Security Intelligence Services, known as the SAS. This is like the New Zealand's FBI. Then we have the GCSB, which is Government Communications Security Bureau. They're supposed to be spying on foreign diplomats, not like me and my kids going to a General Assembly. Then you have the Americans, right? One of the first times that I really realized I might be in some pretty serious trouble was when an outfit called the NCTC followed my Twitter account from their official Twitter account. They're a counterterrorism agency based in America, and they're following me on Twitter. I blocked them. Because what do you do when a terrorism agency follows your Twitter account? There's not much you can do. So really, out of spite, I just blocked them. Not that obviously it would do me any good in terms of preventing them accessing my information, but I just figured if they're gonna outright try to intimidate me by following me from their main account, I block them. Then there is the good old Department of Homeland Security, and they are all involved in the fusion centers. Fusion centers are these places that are putting all of these agencies in contact with each other and allowing them to share information in ways that historically they were never meant to be able to do. They're supposed to perform individual functions, very specific functions, but all their data is being merged and all of their operational purposes are being merged, and the end result is that you have this grand mass-scale tyranny across all of the agencies, and they can actually set the whole of government against you if they decide that you're on their target list. And of course you have the CIA, who are really awesome people who drone people with flying killer robots in half a dozen countries around the world. Then you have the private agencies. At the very low level, we have private investigators. Like in New Zealand, we have Thompson Clark Investigations Limited. It's a notorious company that's done all kinds of things like GPS tagging activist cars and actually even getting caught sleeping with and having relationships with activists in New Zealand over protracted periods of time, which is about as sleazy as you can get, to be honest. We have SSI Pacific, which is a lawful intercept company, which basically means they can do everything, well, a lot of what the GCSB or the NSA can do. They can intercept all of your digital communications. They can bug you in 100 different ways, and they consider it to be lawful because they do it to people who are already being targeted by these other agencies. And of course, because they're a private company, they're doing it for money. They're billing, they're invoicing, they are having shareholders and boards and profit and generating profit. Then we have Cubic Defense, which does asset tracking. If you follow Barrett Brown's work or anybody like that, or Project PM, you'll know quite a bit about some of these companies. The asset tracking should be like, there's $1 million necklace going to this fashion show and we want to make sure it gets back on time or in one piece. Unfortunately, asset tracking has become putting a GPS tracker on an activist car and then watching the little blip on the screen as they drop their kid at school in the morning. Their assets are not just material anymore. They have made people the assets that they track. And there is a lot of people, so if they want to make a lot of profit, they just have to target more people. And of course, bill it back to the state. So all of this is happening on public money. Then there's Palantir. Peter Thiel's Palantir. Palantir are involved in financial systems and the banks. They are involved in creating predictive software, but also in flagging financial transactions. It's all embedded in the so-called money laundering legislation that's been instituted around the world that unfortunately is also being used against activists and against journalists who are on the target list. Who do they target? Well, back in the good old days, they just targeted radicals, so-called radicals. If you want the world to be a better place and you realize that you have to do something about it, in order for it to happen, congratulations, you're a radical. If you think that corporations should not dominate all of the markets and resources on the planet, congratulations, you're a radical. If you think that governments should not bomb civilians in multiple countries for money, congratulations, you're a radical. You'll probably be targeted if you try to do anything whatsoever about organizing to make change for the sake of our planet. They also, of course, target hacktivists. Anybody who supports any kind of hacktivism in any way, you get targeted. They also target NGOs and the people who work for them. So these are the people who are in legitimate organizations, some of them like with quite historic organizations. Just by working for those organizations can be targeted. There are so many examples of this, I'm not even going to go into it. Obviously Greenpeace, obviously many of the NGOs operating in, even the children's funds, the Christian children's funds and stuff, all targeted. Then there's the other dissenters, which are the issue-based dissenters, like people who are climate change activists or people who are anti-GMO. But the thing about the privatization of spying is that profit requires growth, and growth in this industry means more targets. So it was never going to be a finite thing. It was never going to be, we will just target the activists, because if you just target the activists, first of all, they diminish the total number of activists, so that would mean less profit. So in order to have more profit, they have to constantly expand the sectors of society that they spy on. So we've seen this in New Zealand. Surveillance cameras used to be for safety in a dark, dingy area. Now they are absolutely everywhere at all times. They have to have ever-increasing saturation of spying in order to make money from it. How do they target us? What do they do to us? Obviously, there's surveillance. This surveillance leads to harassment. State-sanctioned, state-funded harassment. That leads to isolation of the targets as they're more and more harassed. That includes sabotage of our personal effects and of our lives, of the paths of our lives, our relationships and our careers. Then it becomes entrapment, because if we're not doing something illegal, then that's a big problem for them, because they want us to be doing something illegal so that they can justify what they're doing to us. So if we're not doing something illegal, they invent illegal things for us to do and try to suck us into them. Eventually it leads to some form of institutionalization. And if they cannot be successful at any of the aforementioned, if they cannot institutionalize you, in select cases, there are assassination attempts. So, let's break that down a bit. There's physical surveillance. There is the blacked out white van parked outside your house 24 hours a day. There is the dodgy guys in the baseball caps and the hoodies who follow you absolutely everywhere you go at all times. I call them the shadows. There is your mail that looks like rats have been biting the corner of it when it arrives in your letterbox. It's so blatantly obvious that it's been tampered with. There is, in New Zealand, it is now legal for a whole slew of state agencies to covertly place cameras inside your domestic dwelling without a warrant for, is it 24 or 48 hours? I think it was initially supposed to be 48, but they cut it down to 24. They can watch you without a warrant inside your own house. This is Orwell. This isn't Orwell is coming, Orwell might happen. This is Orwell. They have cameras in your house. It's legal. They have legalized Orwell in New Zealand. They impersonate power companies. Power companies staff members specifically. They tamper with your smart meter and use it for surveillance. They work in conjunction with the phone companies, with all of the utilities. They will supply you with pre-installed hardware if you order a new cell phone from your phone company. It will arrive with remote access technology already installed on the device. This has been proved by hacking team releases with WikiLeaks and many other places. They use GPS trackers on your car to have you tracked by someone like Cubic Defense. And they even use infrared on your houses to see who's in your house, where they are, what you're doing at any given time. They also use this on the occupations to see how many people were in the tents at the occupies. Signal surveillance is them surveilling your web services, your applications, all of your devices. It is them compromising your router, your internet service provider. Under the tax legislation in New Zealand, they have actually deputised workers at internet service providers and involved them in the process of spying on their consumers. They can surveil en masse through a Stingray device and collect all mobile phone information, SSNs, from any given area. Then there's private surveillance. This is them targeting your social media accounts. This is them targeting your financial data and your banking. This is your medical data. This is what a really cool, awesome friend of mine from Berlin calls glass masks, which are your big data profiles. So what you bought, where you bought it from, how often you bought it, where you went, everywhere that you are tagged online, all of the information that your insurance company or that any other online company that you use collects about you and then shares with big data companies because they have some fine print in their terms of service, which they think allows them to do that. All of that data is used to form a picture of you and of your spending habits and of your life, of where you go and who you know and what you do and what you buy. Then there is public surveillance. This is surveillance by the local authorities, by the councils. This is your rubbish being separated because you're on the target list by the rubbish company so that someone can trawl through and see whether or not you did your recycling. This is public surveillance at events. This is facial recognition software being used at a sports stadium to collect facial profiles of people who go to watch a football game. This is public safety. In New Zealand, and specifically at Occupy Auckland, we had the head of the Public Safety Board, who's also a city councillor, a guy called George Wood, relentlessly trolling our Facebook page, telling us that we should have Alsatians set on us and water cannons. They should bring out the water cannons to use against us. He's chairman of the Public Safety Board. The Public Safety Board are the people who have access to and control and say over a lot of these surveillance systems. They're also the people who are voraciously targeting activists, and they're also the point of contact between a lot of the security agencies and the civic infrastructure, as are also the transport agencies, because the transport agencies are where the biggest flow of people are moving through. It's usually where the surveillance enters the civic infrastructure first. For example, in Berlin, there is a big pushback against surveillance, and there are not pervasive security cameras everywhere like there are in New Zealand and like there are in many other countries, most other countries. But where you do see them in Berlin is in the train stations, in the metro, in the subway system, in the transport systems. And so the spy agencies tend to integrate with the transport systems and then to integrate with the public safety boards, which would be great if they were using it for rapists and murderers, but unfortunately they're using it to see where Joe Blogg's activist and or journalist goes, you know, before or after writing a blog post that the government does not like. Then of course there's Trapwire. So Trapwire isn't just facial recognition. Trapwire is network surveillance. So it's where the security cameras are not just like owned by the shop that they're mounted in, where the shop owner can look if there's a robbery. They're networked across countries. So now when there's an action at Auckland University in Auckland and there's 2,000 university students protesting, they can sit in Washington DC at a data center and watch that event live through the security cameras. So these network surveillance systems like Trapwire are bridging borders. Like, it's like a borderless world, a borderless surveillance world. And this is where the law is not really caught up with the Orwellian dystopian infrastructure that has been built, because we are not supposed to be surveilled, legally surveilled by foreign countries. That is completely a no-no, yet that is precisely what is happening. You'll find that dozens, if not the majority of countries on this earth can be surveilled from a data center in Washington DC, and that is not by the consent of those citizens of those countries at all. Now that we've dealt with how do they surveil you, how do they harass you? What do they actually do to activists to try and stop them from being activists, and journalists to stop them from writing things that they don't like? They do what I call surprise visits. Surprise visits are the ones you either know about or the ones you don't know about. There is the obvious. There's the break-ins. In December 2011, early December, for the first time ever, my house was broken into. The bathroom window was smashed from the inside of the house. So nobody noticeably broke in from the outside. But they broke a window from the inside to make it look as if they had broken in from the outside. That break-in was just the first in a long series of disturbances inside my home. It was the most overt, and it was the first that I am aware of, but there were many, many, many others that followed. There is the private investigators. So these wonderful private investigators, I'd have them show up at my house and they'd be like, oh, we've heard that you've had some harassment as a result of your journalism, and we're investigating those people. We're not investigating you, but we happen to be investigating the people who you are at odds with. So please give us all this information about these totally unrelated things that we'd like to know about. They covertly film you. You'll notice they hold folders, and inside those folders they have little cameras actually filming you as you talk to them on your doorstep. So definitely don't talk to them if you're an activist or a journalist and strange investigators show up wanting to talk to you. Then there is what's known online as gang stalking. I personally don't see it as gang stalking. I see it as people who are involved with these agencies who work in a coordinated fashion to harass you. They harass you in and with vehicles. They harass you in teams on the street. They will just do whatever they can to get in your face and to push you off balance and to make you have a really shitty day. Then there is the random photographers. You get these photographers with these great big telephoto lens taking photos of you when you walk out of your driveway, taking photos of you when you go to a concert at your kid's school, taking photos of you in a parking lot in the middle of the city when you're minding your own business. They seem to do it for harassment. I guess they also do it so that they've got something to put in their little files about you, but most of all, I think the reason they actually visibly do it to you is to try and just keep you off guard and off balance and never knowing what's going to happen next. Then there's actual interference in your life. There's harassment around you in your social groups that is to harm you, but not directly. You don't necessarily always know that it's happening. So they'll go to every neighbor in your street and they'll say, your neighbor is under investigation. If you see anything strange, you call us. You tell us what you know about them, and they try and pump the neighbors for information. You tend to have some, if you're lucky, like me, you have some really good neighbors that say, who are you? What grounds do you have for this? Where is your warrant? Get out, and send them packing. Then you will probably have some really gullible neighbors who will go, oh my God, they're under investigation. Of course I will help you. You know, even though there's no grounds for that investigation whatsoever. And those are really the people that these guys rely on. There are other cases, I mean, I can't prove this in mine, there are many other cases where people, neighbors, friends have been told that the person is under investigation for child molestation, for drug trafficking. And these are activists and journalists. It's got nothing to do with child molestation or drug trafficking. But these investigators and even the police agencies have to find some way to scare the people in your social circle into A, silence, so they don't tell you that they've had this interaction, B, submission, so that they will participate, they will do what these agencies want, specifically so that the agency can put the pressure on you in a way that is palatable to that member of the public. Because, I mean, who likes child molesters, right? Of course you would want to help catch child molesters, but unfortunately that's not what it's actually about. It's just being used as an excuse. They will interfere in your romantic relationships. I mean, they will literally hit on you in bars. I cannot even count how many guys in polo neck t-shirts, you know, just absolutely screaming off-duty cop I had hitting on me in bars, and it's not just because they think I'm pretty. It's because of my work, and it's because of my activism. They will do this to your partners. They will sow disinformation with your partners. They will set up entrapment efforts with your partners. If they do not like your relationship, they will do whatever they can to destroy it. And if they can, they will institute undercover investigators, if it's the private agencies or even police. I mean, look at the cases in the UK where activists have ended up having children with undercover agents who were sleeping with them to get information from them about their movements. So I promise you I'm not making this up. This is well documented. They will interfere in your romantic relationships, and if they decide that they want to have one with you, they will try very hard to do that as well. They will harass you at events. So they would know that I was going to cover some really big action. I would be on the ground doing my job, and they would just come and push me over. Or, I mean, even I had one time on camera, on film, you can actually see me flying sideways through a crowd because a cop has come and just shoved me as hard as he can when I'm filming to try and stop me filming. But they'll do this through the investigating agencies. They use their agents as well to try and disrupt your footage, to try and throw you off balance at critical moments. Or they will go to a major event that you're at covering, and they will run around telling everybody who'll listen that you are the police, that you are the undercover agent, that you are there to sabotage the event, when you are there just trying to tell the truth and to spread the truth to the public of what is really going on. Then there's digital harassment. Digital harassment on social media can be death threats, can be rape threats, but it can also be targeted messages. Targeted messages that are based off intimate knowledge about your life that has been gained through surveillance. So if they know who was in your bedroom last night, or if they know that someone was in your bedroom last night, or if they know that you popped a pimple in the bathroom mirror this morning because they have covert cameras in your bathroom, they will actually send you messages from sock puppet accounts to let you know that they know these silly little things about your life, which no one should care about. It's not their business. But they do it so that you're aware that you are being watched, because they want you off balance. They want you to make mistakes. They want you to act out. And this is how they do it. This is how they put that pressure on you. It's by letting you know. They know everything, even what you did in the bathroom mirror. They will harass you through other forms of communication. They will make crank calls to your house over and over again, or at different times, or asking for different people, or just hang up on you and not actually talk at all. They will harass you via email. If you're really in a bad position in terms of how far up the target list you are, they will harass you electronically. Like, we have seen in many instances at activism events, things like the LRAD, like the sound cannons, there is versions of those weapons that they use in residential settings. So, especially the audio weapons. So they will actually do that just to harm and to scare you in your own space, even though it is completely, utterly immoral. Then there is the things they do to isolate you. They will intercept your communications, especially if they're not encrypted specifically, or most easily, so that things that you send, you never know if they actually make it to the person you're sending it to. And then you think that you've had conversations that you haven't actually had, and you end up never really knowing where you stand with people, or what has or hasn't been said, or what has or hasn't been received. There is gaslighting. Gaslighting is the best way to isolate someone. It's really horrible and brutal, and it's something that happened to me a lot in New Zealand. So I would get home and I would walk into my lounge, and sitting open on my coffee table would be a newspaper that I did not buy, and it would be open to a specific article, and that nobody else bought because there was no one else to buy it at that time. It would be sitting open to an article that I would understand the significance of. So it would relate to something I'd been writing about or something that had happened in my life. And they would do this expressly to let me know two things. One, they'd been inside my home and my personal space. So if they'd left that newspaper on the table, what else had they done? It would be up to my imagination to work out what else they'd done in that time. But also, because it's something that I could not prove. It's something that I could not explain to people this is happening. I can't go to a police station and say, somebody left a newspaper on my coffee table. I want you to do something about that. There's absolutely no way I could prove that. I had another incident where I had bought a 3-pack of brand new white sports socks, and I left them on top of my dresser in my bedroom. As you do, you buy some new socks, you stick it on your dresser, you go out of your house, you come home and the socks are gone. Not only are they gone, this isn't just a case of missing socks, but a filthy, dirty, sweaty pair of men's socks, and there was no man in my house at this time, men's socks is sitting on my dresser in the exact position where the unopened package of brand new white sports socks was. So someone's been in my house, they have stolen my socks, my unused sports socks, and they have left a disgusting dirty pair of men's socks in its place, purely to let me know they've been there. They've been in my room, in my bedroom, they've been in my dresser. They have stolen $5 worth of socks from me. What can I do about it? Can I go to the cops and say, hey, $5 worth of socks has been stolen from me and somebody's left some dirty socks on my dresser? No, I can't. So these are the ways that they terrorize you. Ways that you can't do anything about. There's no redress for them. And this is precisely why they do it. And this is why they get away with it as well. They do things to you that you would sound completely nuts trying to tell anybody about. And they know that when they do it. It's deliberate. Then there's misinformation. This happened to our media team over and over again. We would be sent like Nazi propaganda that would be dressed up as left-wing, like social rhetoric of social movements, blah 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 blah. And you see it in what happened with the WikiLeaks party actually. Same thing. You see it with Anonymous movement being told that they're a neo-Nazi movement when they've been doing anti-KKK actions for years. This accusation of neo-Nazism is a common thread across all the activists and movements that are targeted. They try to associate us with neo-Nazis, even though it's completely baseless and there's no founding for it. Sabotage is really horrible. You really can't get around this. So either you own your own home, like I did, or you rent a home. If you rent a home, they will come at you through your landlord. So it's back to the telling people you're a child molester thing. They'll go to your landlords and say, this person is under investigation. You need to cooperate with us. You need to let us put cameras in their home. You need to tell us everything about them. You need to do whatever we say. Because they're terrible child molesters, drug traffickers or something, please cooperate. But if you own your own home, and it makes it a little bit more difficult for them, not much, but a little bit more difficult for them to surveil you, they will actively destroy your home piece by piece. They will destroy your belongings as well. It is repetitive damage that they do, so they'll do it over and over and over and over again. They will steal things and they will break things. So a really good example of this is, in my home, I would have a leak spring out of nowhere in my roof, and I would get someone in to patch the roof, and it would cost me a couple $100 or whatever, and they would patch the roof. And then 2 weeks later, the roof would leak again. I would call the roof guy back. He would get up on the roof and he'd say, why did you remove the patch? And I'd say, what? Of course I didn't remove the patch. I haven't been on my roof. Why would I remove the patch? and he'd put another patch on, and I'd pay another couple $100. And then 2 weeks later, the roof would leak again, and he'd come back and say, why is the patch removed again? This is the perfect example of what they do. They will smash water pipes. They will put holes in your roof. They will just do things that, again, you can't prove it. You can't go to the cops and say, my patch came off my roof. But when your patch comes off your roof like 3 or 4 times back to back and it's not you who's doing it, somebody is. And that somebody is probably associated with all the other weird things that have been happening to you that I've just been discussing, especially in the context of you being an activist or you being a journalist and covering controversial topics that the governments do not like you doing. They will take things that they know are precious to you and destroy them just to do the emotional damage. Like a precious antique watch that my grandmother bought me that I used to wear. I left it inside my jewellery box. I come home, I open my jewellery box, everything's still there, everything's fine, except the precise item has had the face smashed with a hammer. They will sabotage your employment. They will do the same thing with your boss or your co-workers that they'll do with your landlord. They will sabotage your relationships and your opportunities. So it's really like the Matrix. Like in the Matrix, they think there's a window and they try and go out it and they open the curtains and there's a brick wall. That is exactly what these guys do with the information that they gather from the surveillance. They create a brick wall wherever there's an opportunity. Moving along, there is entrapment. They will entrap you, especially if you're an activist, at public events through trying to coerce you into doing illegal acts. They will entrap you by speech. So they will get you to have conversations, they'll record those conversations, and they will go and play them to affected parties to try and turn those parties against you. There is digital entrapment, which is one I experienced early on when I'm not a hacker at all, but someone tried to convince me to hack something. Then there's the most horrible of the horrible types of entrapment, which is social engineering. This happened to me in 2013 in the wake of the Snowden disclosures between June, July and end of August. I was entrapped into having an online relationship with Hector Monsegur.
We in fucking Spa Castle. Expect my review soon, bitches.
Mario Fernandez, he called himself. He pretended to be a friend that I had had online for about 7 years or 8 years. And I've actually published the full story about everything that happened back in 2015. You can go and read the whole story if you're really that interested. But he actually committed identity fraud in order to convince me that he was someone that I had always known, so that he could convince me to get into a relationship with him, so that he could pump me for information about my writing, what blog posts I had done. There's really insipid flavor of social engineering. Again, it comes back to these police informants that have relationships with activists and even have children with activists. This is like a digital version of the same thing as these disgusting creeps that will use sex to try to get information out of you about your activism and your journalism. It's the J-Trig program, right? They call it honeypots. They set up honeypots. What they're actually doing is committing identity fraud to coerce unsuspecting people into having completely false relationships with them. Relationships based on false premises. It is a form of rape because it is sexual activity procured or obtained by deception. The deception of you is how they obtain the sexual activity. And they do this for a whole variety of reasons, primarily for information gathering. also for control, also so that they can handle you and get you to do things that they want you to do. And also so they can collect this material and they can have it to use against you or wield against you. In which case I highly recommend just telling the truth like I did, because this has happened to you, because that's the only way you can combat it. Don't sit around feeling bad about what they've done. It's on them. Like, they are the disgusting people doing this. They are the ones who should feel ashamed, not the people who have been good-hearted enough to actually believe them. So if this has happened to you, don't feel ashamed. Speak out and tell people about it. The shame is on the perpetrator, not on you. What's the end game? The end game is to institutionalize you one way or another. It can take many forms. It can just be reformist institutionalization, which means they push you into the conventional political process because they know that that's a have. They know that their game is rigged and they're going to win no matter whether the red candidate or the blue candidate gets in, they're going to get their way. So they'll try and push you into the political system. They'll try and play on your ego. They want you to speak at events and get a profile so that you start worrying about your image and your reputation more than you do about actually the message that you're putting out there and the action that you're taking on behalf of people. They want you to feel that you have something to lose, and they'll play on that. Like, you have something to lose in your reputation, so they'll use that to tailor your behavior and your decision making. They will try to reform you via institutionalization with some complicit NGOs. So they would rather have you working for an NGO where they're surveilling that whole NGO anyway, and where you're working on set projects and where it's budgeted and where there's a structure where you receive promotions or demotions. And again, it can affect your they're trying to attack your ideology and your motivation. They can control your motivation through employment. They would rather have you working at a call center for $10 an hour than changing the world. They would much rather have that. So if they can get you to do that, they will get you to do that. In the most severe cases where none of their efforts have paid off, they haven't been able to stop you doing what you're doing, especially if you're sufficiently isolated and you don't have good support. They can actually attack you to the point where you start to lose the plot, not of your own volition or not of natural causes, but purely because of what they're doing to you. And there have been cases where activists are in fact then sectioned under the Mental Health Act and are forced into mental hospitals. And they are drugged. Once they're in mental hospitals, they're drugged against their will, and they are discredited by those means. They're prevented from continuing their activism or journalism, and they are discredited by the mental health record. Not to mention the horrible, horrendous effects on their bodies of the drugs that they're given and the experiences that they undergo. The other form of institutionalization is imprisonment. So you see that with Barrett Brown, you see that with Jeremy Hammond, you see that with Chelsea Manning, you see that with many of our most beautiful and amazing whistleblowers and journalists and activists. They will find a way to put you in prison. Look at the guy who filmed Eric Garner's death? Many of those guys actually, the citizen journalists who filmed various people being hurt by the police, they're targeted and they're put in jail. Purely because they recorded the truth of what was happening. So, big deep sigh, because now we come to the most depressing part of all. And that is the assassination attempts. So, if all of the above, if you're in an exceptional circumstance where they cannot institutionalize you, where they've tried every other thing on you and none of it's worked, then it is possible they will actually try to just kill you or to really hurt you or injure you. In my case, on Mother's Day no less, they tried to drive me off a cliff. They had a car pull out in front of me at a township in a rural area and a car pull out behind me, and then those two cars were used to box us in and to control our speed so that we couldn't drop back and we couldn't go forward and we couldn't get around because we're in this like windy cliff top area in this rural part of Northland in New Zealand. And then once they controlled our movement and our speed, they started using what I've later found out are called dazzlers. They're these really high-powered lights, coloured lights, and they shine them into the rearview mirrors from the vehicle behind. They shine them into the rearview mirrors to dazzle the driver. It's to stop so that the driver loses their vision. And in a situation where you're in one lane each way, windy clifftops road at night, losing your vision is really not a good thing. There were other incidents, like where the oil cap on our car was removed, again in a rural area where it's a high speed zone, and as soon as the vehicle is travelling at speed after the oil cap's been removed and you're not aware of it, the oil splashes all over the engine and then catches on fire. So the next thing you know, you're driving at speed in a car that is on fire. It's a particularly awesome experience. And then there's medical assassination attempts as well. So there's situations where they can give you the wrong drugs, or an overdose of drugs, or I received a really horrible, nasty message in 2011. It was a threat, and they actually said, if you mess with us, we will kill you and nobody will know that it was murder. Nobody will know that we have done this to you. So they're basically bragging about the fact that they have methods of getting rid of people which are untraceable. They want you to give up. They want you to run. They want you to run. Because if you run from them, for example, one guy who was really severely targeted, his house was repeatedly broken into, his pets were stolen, his belongings were destroyed, he was prevented from getting a job, they just ruined his life. He ran out of the city, just took off, because what else do you do when you're being stalked 24 hours a day? He thought that was a good idea, it was to try and get out of town. They picked him up, booked him into a mental hospital, incarcerated him, drugged him, and the works. So they want you to run, because if you run, they can pass it off as unstable behavior. They want you to lash out, they want you to freak out, they want you to hurt people. I mean, as sick as it sounds, that's what they want you to do, because that gives them the perfect excuse to pick you up and the perfect excuse to put you away. So do not hurt people, do not run, do not lash out. Hold your ground. They want you to break down. They want you to fall to pieces. They want you to not be able to cope with what is happening to you in a way that is visible to others that you can't cope. For exactly that same reason. Do not do that. Find some community. There are people out there who can help you, but step one is getting in touch with people who understand that this is happening to you, because it's happening to thousands of people all over the world.
So I can face another day again.
What you learn to do is to use their surveillance systems against them. Get in public if they're hurting you. Go on their surveillance systems, their public surveillance systems. At least then there is a record of what is happening to you. You're better getting in amongst a lot of people than you are going into an isolated situation. Be visible. Do what you do visibly. Let people know, hey, this is me, this is my name, this is what I do. Check out what I do, see that I'm legit, and please keep an eye on me because this is risky. Document what you do. Make sure that you have documentation to show. This is what I've been doing and this is what's been happening to me. Hold on, document that responsibly. Don't go running off after the attackers trying to track them down and end up in more trouble. Just document what they're doing to you and hold on to those records, keep them in a safe place and distribute them amongst people that you trust. There's a lot more to my story than what I've just been able to tell you about in this video. But for now, this is a really good start on what it means to be a person of interest, what you face, who does it to you, and how they do it, and how you should respond. I hope this is helpful to you. And if I do get confirmation that I am one of the 88 New Zealanders that was spied on by the NSA on behalf of the New Zealand government, you can be sure that you'll be hearing more from me.